Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Mouse House Podcast. I'm your host, Hunter Begun, and I'm here with our current artist in residence, Jenie Gao. Yeah, could you give us a little insight into your art and who you are for everyone who doesn't know?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me here, Hunter. So my name's Jenie Gao, and I am a public artist, printmaker, and social practice artist. And I also do consulting work in equity and ethics for the fine arts industry. A little bit about my work. I own an anti-gentrification arts business, and so that's part of what my consulting work supports. And I'm currently based out of Vancouver, British Columbia, on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish peoples. Little insight into the type of work that I do. I do a lot of large-scale hand-carved wood blocks, and I transform the blocks themselves into sculptural installations.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. I did not know that you turned a lot of the things you created on the blocks into full-scale installations. Yes. So cool. Well, I guess since we're already talking about the wood blocks, one thing I did was I like to go all the way to the end of a person's Instagram that I'm interviewing, and then I will scroll up and see how it started versus what it looks like now. And I noticed your Instagram kind of started with, it was just focused on your art, really. And then it's still focused on your art, but eventually you started posting more pictures of yourself with the art and other people near it. And it was that, and just I was wondering if that was a conscious thing one day. You're like, oh, I need to start posting pictures with the art, and how did your Instagram account really change into what it is now? Because it is very different than it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm sure lots of people have seen evolutions happen with their social media feeds too, and how they represent themselves. I think that for me, a big part of the foundation of my work is storytelling. I care a lot about the stories that artwork can convey and what they represent. And so in terms of how that gets represented online and how I use online tools like social media to connect with people, at a certain point I realized that while I've always been really good at documenting the artwork itself, I earlier on was not as good at documenting myself with the work and sharing who I was as an artist with the people who want to connect with that work. But that, say when I gave a public artist talk or did an interview, what really strengthened the connections that I could make with people was the stories that I was able to tell about the work. And a lot of the work that I do is connected to personal stories. And so it just made sense to start having more of myself in the posts, and to share more of the stories about myself, and including images of myself. And I think learning throughout my practice that when I am documenting things, that recording can be an act of care. So what I choose to record and what I choose to represent is as a reflection of what I care about. And it also helped when my business got to a point where I could hire event photographers, and so then I didn't have to worry about being the person documenting an event or an art project that I was doing. And so that certainly created more images of myself that I could share online when I was able to hire other photographers. And then when the pandemic hit and none of us could interact with each other, then I only had myself, and so I had no choice but to learn how to take selfies properly. I'd say that that's probably been the evolution of how I've told my stories online, and being willing to engage directly with the viewer, and recognizing that is actually a primary strength that we have as artists, is to connect directly with people.
It's I will say I still have yet to master the art of taking a selfie. I don't think I ever will. And as someone who's almost always behind the camera, it's so interesting seeing people, other artists, especially when the pandemic hit, they had to be their own videographer and photographer. And I think that definitely helps, because they spend a lot of, if you had to hire a photographer, you're not going to hire a photographer to be in your own studio when you're just making something, right. But you can do it yourself. And then social media is the ultimate tool for sharing with people, connecting. Jeremy, if you had to pay the light bill again? No. The lights really ruined my train of thought. But so I want to talk about how, I think you said that this was your 8th anniversary of quitting your job and starting your own business.
It'll be
coming
the
up
9th soon.
The 9th? Wow.
Yeah, on August 29th.
So I want to know about the transition period, and the time leading up, and then the transition period to quitting, and then once you felt like, okay, now.
So you want to know about the before time.
Yeah, right
and
around
then-
before, and then you're like,
the day it happened.
and then the days leading up to like, well, like, did you have an LLC before? Did you quit and then like got the LLC? Like,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So before I quit my last job, so I have worked a lot of jobs since I guess I was 17, and I worked in a lot of different industries, held a lot of different jobs. I think by my early 20s, I had something like 10 different jobs, and a lot of times was working, say, multiple part-time jobs, especially when I was going through undergraduate, and so I'd worked, I'd say, the three industries I'd worked in by the time I'd quit, the three major industries. I'd worked in museums, I'd worked in public education in the Milwaukee Public School District, and then I'd also worked in the manufacturing sector. And so I've been in a lot of positions where I've gotten to just see the back end of the way a lot of institutions work, and to build a bigger picture of how all these different systems are connected. And so, for instance, in the museum industry, I worked as a security guard, and so I was working in the security and the facilities of that space, and seeing the behind the scenes that a lot of people who say are in the white collar roles in curation are not going to see. And then in public education, I was teaching in Milwaukee at a school that was primarily Black and brown students, and seeing the dichotomy of how little was invested in those schools, when just nearby the white suburbs that were very affluent had a ton of money for the arts, whereas we did not for the students at my school. And then when I worked in the manufacturing sector, seeing again the split between who's working the white collar positions, who's working in the plant, and essentially who has access to creative autonomy and agency in our society. And so, for myself, I had my BFA at that point, my Bachelor of Fine Arts, and so I have a fine arts background, and so then to be able to see the ways in which arts and culture and our ability to assert ourselves as valuable via arts and culture defines who also gets to exist in a lot of different spaces. That was a lot of what informed me leading up to that time. One good thing that there were a number of good things, but I'd say one good thing that came out of my time in manufacturing was that I did learn a lot about business operations. And so I was a project manager in my final position doing lean methodology projects, and so looking at ways to make the work processes safer and less wasteful, and that's something that I did not get when I was in fine arts school. So fine arts school taught me to be a great fine artist, but not necessarily about the business side of things, and those are tools that, frankly, are hard to access at a lot of smaller organizations as well. It's really the big organizations or the big companies that have the tools and resources to send employees to a lot of trainings, and just the number of resources that you learn to say develop a workflow that's really safe. And it changed the way that I work as an artist, to be able to build things in my own studio that are more sustainable, and that make it so my body hopefully will last a long time, and I can keep doing the type of work that I love. And so anyway, I got to a point. There were probably a number of converging things, but I'd always wanted to see if I could make it as a full-time artist. But I didn't come from a family that saw that as possible. I definitely had parents, community members who just very much steered me away from the fine arts, and so it just didn't seem like something that was economically viable. But I couldn't get away from the fact that it was important, and that the fact that I am an artist and see things as an artist, it changed the way that I looked at work at the company that I worked for as well, and frankly, it made me better at say designing the work environment and making changes than a lot of my colleagues who had engineering and finance degrees because they never went out into the plant floor and looked at the work and talked to the people, whereas I did, because that's what we do as artists is we engage with processes and we actually get into the process and we talk with people. And so I wanted to see if it were possible to start an arts business that didn't replicate the same exploitations that frustrate me so much about the arts industry at large, and to see if this could be a pathway to get the social and cultural representation that I want and that I want other people to have as well. And so in 2014, August of 2014, I quit, and I'd saved up a good enough chunk for me to live for a while without a full-time job, and I gave myself 2 years to make my business profitable. I did not have an LLC when I quit. I honestly did not have too much of a plan for how much of a planner I am in other ways. I think it was more, I knew it was something that I would probably do at some point, and then things aligned in such a way that my intuition told me this is the time. And if you wait any longer, it's just going to keep getting harder for you to make this decision. And so I took a leap of faith and I quit and spent some time reflecting on what type of arts business I wanted to build. And I'd say the first year was a lot of figuring that out. And then by the 2-year mark, I had turned a profit. And so that was enough for me to keep going. And after, I'd say maybe the first, I think by the 4th year, I had enough, my business had grown enough that I felt really solid. And in those early couple of years, there's always that question. It's like, oh, did I make a mistakes? And like, did I just like totally like screw up my life? And should I go back to a job? And I'd say by year 4 was when the commissions were rolling in, the exhibitions were rolling in, and I felt like, I'm not actually thinking about applying for a job anymore. This is my life. This is what I'm doing, and that's amazing. This is my job, So, and since then, I've continued to grow most years in the business. Sometimes I stay stable, and I also decided to go back to graduate school in the last couple of years, and so I got to a place where I felt like I could afford to take that time and reduce my client load. But I've been able to overall continue growing my business and doing the type of work that I'm interested in. So I do public art commissions, and with the commissions that I'm doing, look at the ways in which we can also change the policies and best practices around those to be more equitable and can center better pay for the vendors and contractors and apprentices that I hire, that can honor the intellectual property that I've created and that any of my collaborators have created, and honor the communities as well who will live with the work. So public art commissions, the fine art prints that I create, and the consulting that I do that supports all of that in terms of policy. Yeah.
Very amazing. A lot of artists that I meet don't have a business mindset, and I think more people need to adopt it, because to make doing their art very sustainable. But it's amazing you're able to just quit your job one day and do a whole business and make it profitable in 2 years. It's awesome. This is my 1 year into being a full-time, I would call myself an artist, but I don't really have a name for the art I do yet. I'm trying to figure it out. Artist, just artist in general. But hopefully, who knows what I'll do after. Maybe as soon as I got started working here, I got an LLC.
That's great. Good job.
Hunter Begun Productions.
Yes.
And
highly recommend the LLC.
Yes. A lot of artists don't know. It's only like $200. If you're even in New York, it's only like $200.
Yeah, it's cheap, and then you have it forever. And you pay a nominal fee. It's usually about $20-$25 to renew it each year. And it's a layer of protection for you.
You get a business bank account. You get all these benefits in just having one. So if you're an artist and anyone listening is an artist and you don't have an LLC,
Get an LLC.
Yeah, people, you can get paid through the LLC business number and tax stuff. It's all just put money in there and buy whatever you need, and then the tax write-off is just all you need an LLC. That's my only thing.
Yep, absolutely.
So I would like to, I guess, step back from the greater picture for a moment, and ask how you discovered Ma's House, how you heard about us here.
Yeah, that's oh gosh, yeah, I like this story. So, Brianna and I have been friends for a really long time. We've known each other for several years at this point, and it was actually back when she was still living in Milwaukee. And at that time, I'd since moved to Madison, but I was in Milwaukee often, and I was a founding curator of an arts gallery in Madison. And so I'd gone down to Milwaukee. I was looking at a lot of different artist studios, looking at different work, and Brianna actually wasn't there that day in her studio, but I saw her work and it was phenomenal. She's doing these big charcoal drawings, immersive charcoal drawings at that time. And so she wasn't there, but I took one of her business cards. And when I got back to Madison, I was chatting with the executive director of the art center that I was a part of. And the executive director was looking to fill an exhibition slot on our calendar. And I said, well, hey, I just found this amazing artist in Milwaukee. Why don't you reach out to her? And she did. And so the first time Brianna and I actually met in person was while she was installing at that gallery. And yeah, and we've just had all sorts of parallels since then. We're just in terms of like her grief work, and both of us lost a parent early, unfortunately, but it also just creates a lot of, I think, understanding between us. And so we were just really fast friends, and then worked together on a lot of different arts initiatives in Wisconsin. And then she met Jeremy, and they fell in love, and Jeremy whisked her away to here at Ma's House, to start this amazing residency. And then the timing finally aligned for me to come here. We've been chatting about having me out here, and it finally worked out. And so and I'm just so excited to be here, and really, really love how all those pieces came together too.
It's been it's so funny that Jeremy whisked her away, but
yes,
Jeremy's a crazy man. So I do want to ask. So when I was doing the Instagram research, I did notice that like one day, like a really far back post, Brianna did like it, and I was like, what? Did Brianna go back and start liking everything of yours?
No.
So I was wondering. So I was like, I wonder
long.
if they knew each other. And I was like, what the heck? This is crazy. I guess Brianna knows you.
Yeah.
Which is always, it's interesting to see how a lot of people at Ma's House, even if they don't know anyone, they know someone who else has been at Ma's House, and I follow them, then I'll like see them on their posts. I'm like, oh my god, everyone knows everyone here. Somehow.
The art world's tiny. The world's tiny, and the art world's even tinier.
It feels really big when you're like on the outside of it, and I know you know, but then like, when I first started, meet one person, and then they're like, oh yeah, my other friend applied, and then their friend would be like, oh yeah, they told me about you. My other friend's coming down. Just so interesting. Like, Brianna did not tell me that you guys were friends before or anything, so it was just interesting finding that out. Another kind of basic question, but so are there any art mediums that you're like eyeing to start to try?
To try?
Yes, anything new you want to try?
Ooh, yeah. I am really excited about digital fabrication, and so using laser cutters and CNC machines and being able to work from a digital design to create something, 3D printing. Those are I've been able to do some work with the CNC machine and the laser cutter in the last year or so, but I just I feel like I'm just on the precipice of trying out what these machines can do, and I'm just so excited about it. And so I'd love to play more with the CNC machine, the laser cutter, and the 3D printer, and then look at options for, say, taking a design that's digital and turning it into something sculptural in the real world.
3D printing is pretty amazing.
I don't
know too much about the other, the laser cutting and the, what do you call it, the CNC. I'm not sure about that, but the 3D printing is ridiculous. Now they even have like pens where you can 3D print and like draw.
So I'm really excited about digital fabrication labs and all that they have. So at some point I may have to get a membership to one of them and tinker around more.
That'd be cool. One of the first podcasts that I wasn't even recording, I was kind of like an intern at this other guy's podcast, not even that long, like a couple years, 3 years ago now. And we were going to this artist residency place, this giant house in Sleepy Hollow, New York, which is like 3 hours from here. But they had an entire 3D fabrication area in it. They had resident artists. They would have like, I think 30 resident artists there at a time. This place was huge. But they would always have a 3D person there using all these different things. And then so like I talked to him for like an hour, and he was showing me so many different things he would do with with all this technology. I was like, well, and at that time I was like, this is going to be the future. Some things are going to happen with this. Like, people are going to be able to make stuff, like even not art, but like you can make like a spoon. You need a spoon? Oh, I'm out of spoons. Let me go make a plastic spoon real quick. So I'm hoping to have, I can't figure out how to use the technology yet myself, but I'm hoping that it becomes more accessible eventually to where we could have one like over there in the corner, and I could like make cool. My mic stand breaks up. Let me just print out a new mic stand real quick. I think that would be awesome.
Also, hopefully it doesn't break.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully, I probably shouldn't have started tapping the mic while we're recording, but these things of metal are pretty strong, but even like if a screw comes off or something, you can just make a new one. I think that's just so cool. Right. And then there's also the dangers of 3D printing, where you can like build weapons and stuff.
Yeah, there's that too.
Yeah, just crazy that you can even do that, but they'll have to figure out something to stop that. So I also want to ask about how does your way of making art change when you're at home rather than when you're on a residency?
Yeah, well, residencies are a concentrated amount of time, and it changes depending on the length of the residency. I've done residencies that are, say, a month or a few months long, and then others like Ma's House where it's only a 2-week residency. And so I'd say that when I'm at a residency, if it's one of the longer ones, at least a month long, then it's a concentrated time for me to complete or at least get a lot of work done on a specific project. And so, for instance, I did an art residency in Buenos Aires, and I was there for a month, and I committed to finishing an all hand-carved woodblock artist book while I was there. And so I finished an edition of artist books in my time there. And so that's enough time to do a project like that. And so whereas I'd say with the shorter residencies, while I am making art, I'm typically making quicker things or smaller drawings, smaller pieces. Like you've seen, I've been working on my sketches of the water based on the waves that I saw at Cooper's Beach, and then also creating a water rabbit for my Asian diasporic zodiac. So that's a small drawing that I finished in my time here. And then I've started a small woodblock as well. But these are all smaller projects. And I find that the bigger value out of these shorter residencies is the chance to absorb new information that then becomes the fodder for projects longer term. And so I found that with each of the residencies that I've done, there's just a lot of information that I'm absorbing while I'm here, and I can't act on all of it right away, but I'm taking it all in, and then when I leave, all of that information that I've received, that's when I have time to process it, and then I find that what I've learned, the ways in which my knowledge and sources of inspiration have changed, that changes the work that I make, and it starts informing my upcoming larger scale projects. As far as when I'm at home, the time limit then becomes really just whatever I'm working towards. If I'm working towards an exhibition, or let's say I'm doing a public art commission, then that's the time frame that I have to work on. I tend to do really large projects that are very slow and take a lot of time. And so, for instance, some of the large scale, say 3x4 foot wood blocks that you may have seen on my website, one of those easily takes a couple of months to finish carving. And then if I'm creating sculptures out of them as well, that could easily be a quarter to half of the year that I'm spending on one project. And so these are slow methodological projects, and the same with public art, where there's just a lot of different stages to work through. And for better or worse, I guess I decided that I like making slow, methodical work, and and so that's how I tend to work. Whereas residencies are much more focused. This is one specific project, or if it's a very short residency, then this is what I'm hoping to learn and experience while I'm here. And I'm just really in a space where all of my senses are heightened so that I can be really observant about where I am. And and then based on the growth from that experience, that changes the art that I do later.
I wanted to ask a little bit about I saw you did some murals, and that seems very different, like process than doing a wood carving or anything to do with the tools you use. Especially even the tools are very, very different. How did you get into doing murals and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, I really like working big. I think that was the first impetus. I love working big, and I also love the ability of an artwork to change a space and not just change what it looks like, but also inform how we as people use that space and who gets to use the space. And so part of it was that I knew that I like working on large projects, and I wanted to find a way to be able to make something that could be semi-permanent or permanent, and murals were one way of doing that. I think also, while yes, on a technical level, there are a lot of differences between, say, painting a mural and creating a woodcut. On a philosophical level, one of the things that these mediums share is that they both have the opportunity to democratize space and information. And certainly these things can be misused. Printing text works can be used to spread misinformation. Public art can be used to create hostile architecture or monuments to awful things. But that if we use these mediums with a sense of social responsibility and an awareness of what we're trying to steward, then printing becomes a way of sharing information and being able to share it with potentially a lot of people, because you can create multiples. And public art and murals are a way of transforming a shared space. I mean, one thing with a lot of, say, murals and other public artworks is that they are a part of the landscape, and so they kind of by default occupy spaces that lots of people share. They cannot be a singular experience. They must be a collective experience, and so that's a big part of my draw to working with that medium.
I saw you did a mural on a house, an entire wall. I thought that was really cool, because I was thinking, so there's Ma's house, and then there's this other family home that we call like the Pink House. I want to know about that. And because I have there's the Ma's house, and there's this other house called the Pink House. That's what the family calls it. And it was this entirely pink house on the outside, family home. And now no one has been taking care of it. And it seems to be like, well, now it's Hunter. Hunter gets this deal with this. But everyone else wants it to be pink still. And pink is not my favorite color. And I don't really want to have a pink house per se. Okay. But I was thinking, why don't I let, we have so many artists in the family. Yeah. Why don't we let people make murals around, like parts of it can be pink, and then there will be murals on like each wall or something like that. So that's why I'm so interested in how does someone let you paint their house, their entire, let them do a mural like that.
How did they?
Yeah, I mean, like, how did that come to be? Did someone like reach out and they're like, I need my house painted, but I want it to be a mural?
Yeah, so so that house, it used to belong to Mary Burke, who is, she's one of the, I guess, she would be a public figure in Wisconsin, but she previously ran for governor in Wisconsin, and then is also part of the Burke family that owns Trek bicycles. And so she's just a very involved presence in the community, and in terms of a lot of the organizations and the causes that she supports. She also runs a nonprofit called Building Brave, and so she actually reached out to me initially to do an interview for her nonprofit, which supports women and shares women's stories. And so I did a Facebook Live interview with her for her nonprofit, and we did the interview in front of one of my murals. And after the interview, she asked me if I would come by and see her house and see about doing a mural. And so I came and I looked at the house, and we talked about it. And she at that point just recently bought that house, and she just wasn't satisfied with any of her solutions for changing the siding of the house. And then she saw my work and said, well, what about a mural? And the wall, the mural wall faces a bike path and a bridge. And so there's just a lot of pedestrian traffic coming through that area, and you can actually see it across the bridge and across the creek over the treetops. And so just a really lovely site. And so while it's a private residence, it's also the side of the house that faces the public infrastructure, and a lot of people who are on the pedestrian path and on the bike path nearby who pass by it. And so it just made a lot of sense to transform that wall. I mean, it would have been a really boring solution to change the vinyl siding to a different type of siding. And hey, you can see the side of the house from all the way across the creek and over the trees. Why don't we create something really beautiful, like a work of art?
Yeah, well, it looks awesome. I really like that one. Hold on. I need to access my... Oh, yes. Can you tell me a little about the gun dogs I saw at the beginning of your...
Yeah.
I thought they were really cool.
Yeah.
And you had so many different iteration of the gun dogs.
Yeah, the gun dogs and the bulldogs.
Yes,
so
and the bulldogs.
We have to talk about both of them together. So so the bulldogs and the gun dogs are, I guess, among the characters that I've created in my work, and they're kind of an allegory of some of the tensions in the different social issues that we as people work through. And so thinking about allegory and the way in which animals are often conduits and stories to tell stories about people. But so with the gun dogs and the bulldogs, the gun dog has, for those who are listening, they have a gun for a head, whereas the bulldog has a bullhorn for a head. And what I'm evaluating in this series is the ways in which we say inform ourselves, inform the animals that we keep around us like dogs, and to what end these things evolve. And so in this particular allegory, the dog, via its domestication, has become in some ways a companion, in other ways really a service animal to the ends that people want for dogs. And so possibly perhaps earlier on in our relationship with dogs, it was more symbiotic, but as we've domesticated, frankly, we've kind of screwed dogs up. We've screwed dogs up really badly. So the gun dog represents kind of the extremity of a manipulation of a dog breed, to the point that here's this dog that is entirely militarized and used towards our worst and most violent ends as people, and in service of what people think is right. Whereas the bulldog with the bullhorn for the head represents the opposite of that, the evolution of something that represents protest and rebellion against the systems that we've created. And so with working with a dog, I'm also working with some of the characteristics that we associate with dogs, the fact that we do see them as loyal and they're considered man's best friend, and these on the surface level seem like such good things, but they're things that can be so easily manipulated and misused, which is how something like the gun dog comes to be. Here's this animal created for loyalty above all else to people. And what does loyalty above all else mean? Yeah.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I really like that. So, also, when I was researching you, I saw there was a ton of different articles about you. People have been writing about you interviewing you for a long time. And I came upon that you actually have a TED Talk.
Yeah.
And I thought that was so cool. I don't think I've ever met anyone. And I ended up finding out they had a TED Talk before. So, I was asking, how did that come to be?
Yeah. People in the Madison community who are organizing a TEDx event reached out to me and asked if I would do the talk. I think I said before that I'm a storyteller, and so I do have a presence in the community for as being someone who's willing to speak out on a lot of different issues, and especially with the reasons that I created my arts business. I've spoken out a lot about arts advocacy issues, arts equity issues, who can actually make it in a career like the arts that relies so much on unpaid and underpaid labor, and what that means for, say, diversifying the field of the arts. And so I just have, I'd already done previous talks, and I've also just written a lot on these subjects of arts equity. And so the people who were organizing that particular TEDx event knew of me and reached out to me to ask for me to be a part of that event. And yeah.
It's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've watched so many TED Talks in my life, especially like in school, they'd show it, and then like random TED Talks, be like, oh, the teacher would be like, this is a TED Talk I saw on this, and they'd show it to us. It's kind of like a mythical situation, I feel like, is being on TED Talk. Mm-hmm. And speaking of some of your other interviews, I was reading some of them. You had mentioned one time that you had thought that Wisconsin wasn't a very good place to start as an artist because they have very low artist funding. So I want to know is, why did you ended up staying? Why did you start in Wisconsin? Why didn't you go somewhere else to start your art business?
I mean, to be honest, I kind of started there by accident. I was just already there. I was working for a company in Madison at that point, and and so I just already lived there because I worked there, and it's the sort of thing where if I knew everything I knew now, would I have done the same things? I don't know, but sometimes I guess sometimes there is such a thing as having too much information, and I had just enough information and enough brazenness to actually go through with quitting my job and giving this thing a go. All right. Yeah. So I didn't choose it specifically. I just happened to already be there. But as far as why I stayed, as frustrating as it is to be in a state that has so little art support, there's also just a phenomenal community that is so resilient that it's just honestly hard to find in a lot of other places. And so especially because I've been so outspoken about arts equity issues and outspoken about things like the funding issues in Wisconsin, I've just been like, it ended up being like a really great place to build a business that has a really strong community network, and so I've lent my skills to fight for other people, and other people fight for me, which is an amazing and a humbling experience to have. And so I think part of why I stayed for so long is because in spite of all of the structural obstacles via the public funding and government infrastructure, in spite of all of that, the community that can survive in that environment is so unbelievably solid that I just really fell in love with the people that I got to work with and that I got to know via the artwork that I'm making. Yeah.
It seems a strong community seems to be. I will say, everything when I was doing research, you do speak out against a lot of things, and it's pretty amazing. That I always feel like I was getting educated on issues while just like trying to figure out what people have asked you, what not to ask. And I was like, oh, let me read about this, and there'd be things I didn't know about. I'd have to end up being like, well, let me research that later. So that was so interesting that there were so many things that you were talking about that I needed to also learn about myself. What do you think about the art? I mean, I'm not sure how much time you spent like in Southampton town and like the other art places around here, but in the short time you had here, what do you think about the art community in Southampton?
Yeah. I mean, I'm having a blast here,
Yeah.
quite frankly. Yeah, I found it to be super fun, and part of that is also that I have great hosts. Here's my shameless pitch out there for Jeremy and Brianna. They're amazing. But yeah, I mean, especially it's summertime in the Hamptons, there's just a lot to do, and it feels. I feel like New York in general tends to feel like the art world on overdrive. And so it's just really exciting and a lot of fun. And there are so many things happening at the same time. And then I've had two hosts who have been so good at getting me to a lot of different places or telling me about all the places that I could go on my own. And it's just, I'm having a ton of fun. While I'm here. So, I haven't been here super long. I don't know the Hamptons really well, but at least everybody that I've gotten to connect with so far, via Brianna and Jeremy and via Ma's house, I find it to be just a really incredible community and group of folks.
I'm glad you enjoyed so far. Do you have a favorite thing you did off of Shinnecock? You can
Gosh.
You did a lot of things.
I did
Every
a
time
lot
I
of
checked your
things.
story, it was like 10 different things.
It was 10 different
"Jeez."
things. Yeah, I know. Yeah, my Google Calendar's been so full the last few days. I don't know if I've had a favorite thing. I think that there's just been, some of it has been the scheduled things that, like the shortest flight that I was able to get to New York was a 4.5 hour long red-eye flight. And so I landed at 8 a.m. at JFK, took the Long Island Railroad out here. Jeremy and Brianna picked me up at 2 p.m. and were like, oh, do you want to go to Glen Ligon talk tonight at the church? And I said, sure. And so, and then we went to like 3 back-to-back events. And so doing things like that, like getting to go to a talk by an artist of Glen Ligon's caliber is really phenomenal. And then we got to go to a private reception after and go to another event at the Guildhall. And so that's I think maybe more, the more dazzling public side of the arts industry that a lot of people see and so that stuff is really fun. But it was also really fun discovering things on my own by having, yes, a busy schedule, but having enough openness to get to do things on, just on my own, or just by saying hi to people and then suddenly making a fast friend who's willing to show me other things. I went over to the Southampton African American Museum and met a ton of amazing people there. And one of them offered to give me a tour of the Eastville Heritage House in Sag Harbor. And I love getting to know that piece of history, and that there's been this long-standing Black enclave in Sag Harbor that a lot of people probably don't know has existed for over 100 years. And so, and to get a personal tour from somebody whose family has owned property in that community for so long and has made sure that historical site has been preserved. So that was a really cool experience, and that just came from chatting with people while looking at art. The woodcut workshop here at Ma's house, that was super fun. Yeah, I love doing that. And I feel like I, again, met really great people by attending that workshop. Sam over at the church also hosted some workshops. I went over there and attended his workshops, and we also made prints together over on his press, and I met even more people that way. And so I feel like I've had all these little side quests that have emerged just by being open to the experience. And yeah, so that's a lot of fun too.
Yeah. It's amazing to me how much you were able to do in your short time here. In the workshop was really fun. Anyone who missed out on your workshop,
oh yeah, they missed out.
You truly missed out.
Yeah.
But it was so interesting. The people who showed up, a lot of them I don't think had been to, that I'd never seen at a workshop before, and that's one thing. So like when my Aunt Denise does a workshop, it's a lot of the people who do it, they love doing it, so they always come back. And then when we have an artist in residence do a workshop, we always get a few people who are like, oh, I've always wanted to try that, and then they come by and they have a good time. But it was just so interesting seeing like what different artists who they can get out to Ma's house just by being here and offering up a 3-hour. Your workshop was particularly long and fun, but like a nice 3-hour workshop, people are willing to travel from a little further away.
People were traveling from like an hour away to be there last night, which is awesome. There's this one woman who comes to some of the workshops who she was actually at the opening your first full day here. They come all the way from the city like once a week, and then like take the train and then find a way down here somehow, and then go back the same day. People are becoming very supportive from far away, which is pretty awesome of Ma's house. That's cool.
What did you think of the opening, by the way? Were you expecting like that many people to be at Ma's house on Saturday? I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, or?
I mean, I don't know. I don't think I had many expectations because it was my first opening at Ma's house, and I certainly had a whirlwind introduction to the Hamptons, and so I had a sense that this place is quite busy in the summertime, which could have meant that it would have been super busy here because everybody's out, or it could also have meant that there were 5 other things going on at the same time, and you just don't know. But yeah, it was really exciting to see so many people show up for the group exhibition at Ma's house right now, and yeah, it's a beautiful show. So yeah, I'm glad a lot of people got to see it both at the opening and since then too. A lot of people have come by for scheduled appointments, which is really nice to see.
Yes, we do private showings of all of our shows. If you just DM the Ma's house or email Jeremy, he'll be happy to give you a tour, or Brianna will give you a tour. Speaking of the show, every time I've come here since that day, the art of the faces on the left side of the TV, every time I always get stuck looking at it for a couple seconds, and it always seems to change a little bit. And I don't know if I'm just like seeing things or something, but today particularly I arrived and it was like a little gloomy outside and everything. The lights were off and I was like, those things are looking at me over there. It's good art, but
they're great.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I don't understand why my brain sees something different almost every time for just those over there. So if anyone, I think you guys should come see it. Great show. Let's see, I think we've so I have 2 more questions. I think the first question is, I would like to know about the wood carving is, how did you fall into that medium?
It was when I was in undergrad, and I initially enrolled in a computer science major. I was in the engineering school, and I'd only applied for universities actually for their engineering programs, and so I did not apply to any fine arts programs. And so I initially was enrolled in computer science, and then I think my 18-year-old brain, the backs and subconscious of my mind, when selecting which of the schools I got accepted into to go to, I chose a school that did have a robust fine arts program, in case I wanted to try out the classes. And so I went to Washington University in St. Louis, and I was lucky that they gave me a full ride there, and that it was attached to my academic records. It wasn't attached to the engineering degree. And so once I was there, it took very little time for me to switch majors into the fine arts. And I think by my second semester, I had already replaced most of my engineering prerequisites with art prerequisites. And by my second year, I had fully withdrawn from the engineering school and fully enrolled into the fine arts program. And yeah, and so once I made that commitment, I think one of the things when I got to WashU, it's a very prestigious private university, and I just felt so out of my element because it's frankly a lot of really wealthy kids. Something like over half the university is students who are from families who are at least in like the top 1 or 5% of income earners in the United States, and only 1% of the students there are from the bottom 30% socioeconomically, and I'm coming from the bottom 30, that bottom 1%, and so I was really nervous about whether I could measure up because I didn't go to a magnet school or a private high school. I didn't have access to a lot of extracurriculars, and wasn't reading Shakespeare when I was 9, but given access to the same resources and facilities, surprise, like poor kids do just as well or better than the rich kids, right? And so I just really wanted to try lots of different things that I wouldn't normally have access to because those facilities don't exist in a lot of other places, and so one of the things that I ended up trying was a printmaking class, and I just fell in love with the whole genre of printmaking as a medium, and then also philosophically, because I knew that I loved the arts, but I also was really uncomfortable with the exclusionary practices that are built into the arts and just all the ways in which the art world is built to focus on exclusivity, the rarity of an asset, and that things can only be valuable if they're singular and they're rare. And printmaking has this long-term history that is connected with political activation and protest and community organizing. And that just felt so much more aligned with why I loved art. And then I think also just, when I made that switch to the fine arts, I did initially think, oh, maybe I should do something quote unquote practical, like graphic design, a creative field where there are jobs, right? And then I, that little bit of wisdom in my like young brain was like, well, wait a minute, like what if, what if the time that you're here isn't to just become a better tool for a job? What if your time here is to learn and experience things that you can't get anywhere else? And so if I wanted to do, say, graphic design, I could access that software outside of school if I wanted to, and the technology is also always changing. But what would be much harder to get would be the richness of the facilities that a university like WashU can command, because they are a very well-funded university. And so having all of that printmaking equipment, all of that letterpress equipment, all of that space to be able to, that's the thing that would be harder for me to find outside of that environment. And then with woodcut in particular, so my final thesis work after I decided to major in printmaking was all woodcuts and a series of artist books accompanying my woodcuts. And part of, I think it's a beautiful medium, and so I was kind of intuitively drawn to it. But in my junior year of undergrad, my father passed away from pancreatic cancer. And I had a bit of an art crisis where I was just why am I doing this? Why am I working so hard to prove that art is important, and what is this to me? And I just started writing a lot, and I started carving a lot, and carving my wood blocks became a way of learning to cut things away to focus on what was important. And especially at that time, I felt I felt a lot of the guilt that can come with grief. My dad and I had a complicated relationship, and I felt like if I let go of that guilt, that somehow my grief was not valid. Like I didn't actually care, and so part of my healing process was learning what to let go of and learning what pieces to cut out to focus on what I actually really cared about keeping, and it just became, being able to tell that story via a medium like woodcut became just really fundamental to the way that I work. And even as my work has changed over the years, those early threads from that BFA thesis work on grief and working with woodcut became really solidified in my practice.
I remember you were talking about some of the safety of doing wood cutting and how you have to be not necessarily intuitive of where you're cutting, because when you're intuitive you kind of put your hand out in front and you could hurt yourself. You have to be very aware of your body, and that seems extremely meditative. So I was wondering if is wood cutting like you also seem to spend a lot of time sometimes in I'm guessing you have to go into the zone. Is it like a extremely meditative thing? Like, what are you thinking of about when you're wood cutting? Are you like
it depends. Sometimes I have a podcast or an audiobook on, and so then I'm focusing on that, but other times I am either playing music or just sitting in silence and working, and I do just get really into the zone, and there are certainly things that I think about, and my upcoming plans and just different ideas or questions that I'm trying to work through. But I do think part of why I love the medium and really why I've prioritized being an artist is when I'm in the zone, my mind is so much quieter. And there's so much, just in the colonial capitalist state that we're in, there's so much pressure to be so busy all the time. And I think I also personally feel a lot of pressure of what I'm supposed to achieve and what I'm responsible for. And that my accomplishments are not my own. They're also just where they determine where I'm going to say socially or financially stand in the long term, and how I might be able to take care of my mom because I'm her only kid, and so I just have I feel a lot of pressure to be good at what I'm doing and to do a lot and to be someone that other people like my mom can depend on in the long run, and that noise level feels like it just reverberates in so many other careers, and in the arts career too, because it is in many ways a stressful career path. But that in the art making itself, if I think about why I'm doing this, that is when my mind is clear, and when I just feel like it's gonna be okay.
Very interesting. What is the piece of work that you've created that you are most proud of?
That's a hard question. I don't know. I'm actually, I guess, most recently, I'm really proud of the negotiation table series that I created. And so my most recent body of work, I created these large-scale wood blocks that I then transformed into tables that are central to these installations with my woodblock prints. And I call the series and the tables themselves the negotiation tables. And so I created these as a way to negotiate the physical space that these tables take up, and then also what it means for any of us that institutions in a white dominant society have not been built for. and how we negotiate ourselves in that space, and how we hold on to our values and our ethics, and what it is that we're trying to create as artists and cultural authors in institutional spaces that were not designed for us. And so, I'm really satisfied with this body of work, because it hits so many different facets of what I think I've been trying to get to through a lot of other projects. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but I feel like this hit every facet of what I wanted, just in terms of the medium, that the act of transforming the wood blocks gives the wood blocks a life beyond being the tool for creating the prints. One thing that I'm frustrated about in fine art printmaking is that when printmaking became a part of the fine art world, it assimilated to the rules of the fine arts, and so it's actually best practice to destroy your printing plates to prove that the prints are rare, and you're supposed to print the destroyed plate to prove that we can't make any more of this print. And so there's a lot of technical knowledge that's lost because so many blocks have been destroyed. And so and just that's the antithesis of what I think printmaking is, which is a medium that is so good at knowledge sharing. And so I've been transforming these blocks as a way of one, taking care of them and like treating them as equally valuable or more valuable than the prints that they produce, of getting away from the destruction of the evidence of the labor to rarefy the asset. Instead, I am elevating the labor and making it quite visible that this is how the prints are made, and I'm displaying them alongside the prints, so you can see the relationship between the prints and between the block. And then with the tables themselves, there's so much culturally and socially that's built in around tables, and we have catchphrases like what it means to be invited to have a seat at the table, and even if you get a seat at the table, then do you actually have the opportunity to make decisions that could benefit or meaningfully impact other people's lives. And so with the most recent, I've built 5 of these tables so far. With the 5th table, I actually took an existing table, an existing dining table, and I cut into the surface of the table, and I embedded my own wood blocks into the surface of the table. And I printed them in these shades of green and red, so they resemble hand-carved jade that had been inlaid into the wood. And so the table I chose is quite specific. The style of it is known as Chippendale, which was a very popular furniture style that emerged in Britain and in the American colonies. And it's actually a table design that is directly appropriated from Chinese furniture from the Ming and Tang dynasties. And so around the time that Chippendale furniture became popular for the British, for Europeans, and for the U.S. colonies, that was around the time that Orientalism and chinoiserie was on the rise, and basically Europeans were obsessed with Asian stuff, and so obsessed that they started funding expeditions for westward expansion, looking for a shorter route to get to Asia, which is what resulted in them landing on Turtle Island and colonizing Turtle Island. You think of like the Lewis and Clark expedition, that was to find a path across the continent to get to the Pacific Ocean so they could get to Asia. And all of the global political intervention that's happened since then, and these different colonial missions that are all connected with each other. And so to take this table specifically, that so many people now, if they were to look at a dining table like this, they associate it with European furniture design. But if you put it next to the tables that it's actually based on that were initially imported and later looted from China and from East and Southeast Asia, you can't even... it's obvious. It's so obvious that it's it's a literal copy of the tables that they looted from China, and that their desire for those goods was what drove them to do so much global harm. And so to be able to bring all of that history back into plain sight and reveal that, hey, this British looking table is actually chinoiserie in plain sight, and here's how it's connected with that history, and to reclaim it with my own mark and embedding imagery that is specific to me into that table is a really important part of that project. And so I'm just I feel like I was able to get into a lot from a technical perspective, and then also a conceptual perspective, and just historically what I was able to connect with this work was really valuable.
It is so crazy to me that now that printmaking's in the fine art world, they even consider destroying prints. Like that. It's so counterintuitive to the actual
it's cultural
art form.
assimilation, right? Like that's the equivalent, right? And so it's just, here's this really radical medium, but then it comes into the institution and it assimilates to those practices. Yeah. So how do we resist that and change that? That's the question.
Don't destroy. It's like I don't know, when you mentioned that to me, it's like I was thinking that it reminded me of like the burning of like a library. It's like they just said, you know what, screw all these books. We're never gonna read them again.
Yep.
Which is why they even made like printing presses, and then it's just so crazy that they would think about it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I would say we've reached the end of the podcast, and thank you so much for being on. But before you go, I'd like to give you the chance to plug in all your social media, any cause you might want to support. Anything is really your time. Anything you might have coming up is your time to just say whatever you want. So the floor is yours.
Yeah. So thank you again for having me on this podcast. This has been a really fun conversation. And so you can find me at Jenie.org. That's spelled JENIE.org. That's my website. Just my first name, only one N, JENIE.org. And then you can also find me on Instagram at Jenie Gao. So that's JENIE, and my last name is spelled GAO. Yeah, and thanks again for having me, Hunter.
Oh, of course, anytime. This was a great podcast. I'm glad we were able to do it. Thank you to everyone listening, and especially thank you if you made it to the end. And I hope to catch you guys on the next episode of the Ma's House Podcast.